Breaking news overnight about the extraordinary effort to protect President Trump after a security threat overseas.
President Trump apparently stowed away undetected on a military jet.
Whisked away in this catering container to a different plane.
Journalists and some White House staffers thought they were on board flying with President Trump on that jet. They had no idea that he had been moved to a different plane or that they were potentially decoys.
I'm number one on their list before you. But if I go, you go, right?
But was there a specific
so perhaps someday you want to change professions.
3 planes, a catering cart and a jet full of hoodwinked journalists. This is the biggest story in America right now. A threat on the president's life from Iran and the elaborate Secret Service ruse to protect him. So over the next 10 minutes, we'll explain everything we know about what actually happened last month during Donald Trump's journey home from the NATO summit. But first, let's rewind a little and look at what we thought happened back on July the 8th. Our correspondent, Tom Bateman, is with us now in Washington. So, Tom, what did we think happened?
Well, Donald Trump was leaving Ankara. It'd been this big NATO summit. There were other administration officials with him. What happened then was fairly usual for the departure from a major event via a foreign airport. With the travelling press with the president. So his motorcade went to the tarmac in Ankara. It's always a very long motorcade. It includes, an ambulance and all sorts of other officials. The press are right at the back in the vans. And as it snaked its way onto the tarmac, it was then the usual procedure. The reporters were right at the back, would have been getting out as the president departed from the Beast, his armoured limousine, headed up the steps, all the usual presidential theatrics. He walked up, turned at the top, gave a wave, disappeared into the plane as the reporters came on the back. Now, one thing that we did know from the time that was a bit unusual was that the reporters at the back of the plane were asked by the Secret Service or told by the Secret Service to keep their window shutters down so that they were unable to look out onto the tarmac. They were told that was because of for security reasons. Now, some reporting at the time made it clear that US officials regarded there to be some kind of credible Iranian threat to the president and the presidential aircraft. That had been known about in the days after this.
So something didn't seem quite right with that official account of events, and journalists started digging. Then the Washington Post published this exclusive story revealing the intricate details of a secret swap involving 3 planes and a catering truck. Here's our correspondent Paul Adams to explain what's being reported.
The US president was due to return from a NATO summit in Turkey when, according to American officials, Iran made a threat to his life. Here we see Trump boarding Air Force One in Ankara. Moments later, a catering truck pulls up alongside the plane. Media reports say he then got into this elevated catering truck and transferred to another aircraft, a modified Boeing 757 often used by the vice president. Meanwhile, journalists and some White House staff board Air Force One. Both planes then took off. The next time we see Trump is in the UK, disembarking Air Force One, presumably after being smuggled back onto that plane away from the cameras. He then crosses the runway and boards the newer version of Air Force One, the one controversially donated by Qatar, before flying back to the US. While on board that plane, journalists had some questions about their journey.
Do you know why they had us close our window blinds? That was unusual. Well, yeah, because you're, probably on a dangerous flight. They didn't ask me to close mine, but if they did, I would have done it.
We now know that's because he was on a completely different plane. The White House hasn't yet responded to questions about this, but here's what Trump said on the final leg home.
Were you aware of any credible threat by Iran against Air Force One?
I have a threat all the time. I'm number one on their list before you. But if I go, you go.
So, Tom, how unusual is this type of manoeuvre?
There hasn't been such an incident that has at least come to light publicly where a US president has switched planes in this very covert way while the press were told something else on board, because the president had said he was going to be on Air Force One. The White House had made it clear that that was the way he was travelling. You heard the way he answered the questions there, suggesting that he was with them on the plane, when of course he was not. So that is extremely unusual. What is not unusual is for presidents to be moved around in a secretive way. For example, George W. Bush was taken to a military facility in Nebraska after 9/11, but the White House hadn't said that he was somewhere where he wasn't. And that's what's different here, is the public account at the time was in contradiction to the events as they took place.
So, Tom, all this happened during one of the first official trips of the new Air Force One plane donated by Qatar. A plane was gifted to Donald Trump to bridge the gap between the older Air Force One planes, which entered service in 1990, and a newer fleet of planes which have been faced a number of delays. Reportedly cost Qatar $400 million to convert one of their 747 private jets, known as the Flying Palace, fully customised for the US president. It is decked out in red, white, blue and gold. There have been security concerns about the new plane, as Luke Broadwater from the New York Times explains.
It's wrapped up completely in this donation with the Qatari jet, which has caused a lot of controversy here. This jet was not outfitted with the top of the line security standards. It was more of a luxury jet. And so that is raising additional concerns.
So, Tom, something that a lot of people are asking is, how many Air Force Ones are there?
Well, there is this new jet from Qatar, a 747-8, which was donated, as you've been saying, but lacked the security, all of the security protocols, according to some reporting on that, including, it is reported, anti-missile defences, which is why, in the first place, they'd chosen to use this legacy blue and white Air Force One in Ankara, despite the fact that we now know Mr. Trump didn't even use that either. As for traditionally, the Boeing 747, the blue and white liveried United States of America plane that the president uses, there have been two of those, but they look exactly the same. And I mean, if you were on board one, it would be very hard, at least in the press cabins, to tell one from the other. The issue was then about this new plane donated from Qatar, because President Trump said he wanted the new plane quickly, and it was effectively rushed through. But some of those new security modifications are now being made.
Tom, you weren't travelling with the president on this particular occasion, but you have been on Air Force One, of course. Can you tell us what it's like?
Yeah, I mean, it's, the entire experience is quite bizarre. I mean, one of the first things is just from the outset, you have to be in the motorcade from departure point if you're abroad. You join the plane at Joint Base Andrews or Andrews Air Force Base. And then on board, I mean, one of the misconceptions, I think, is the sense that you kind of get a view of the president, you know everything he's doing. I mean, you simply don't. You only see him in those public moments. So that's when he gets on board the plane up the steps, and then, the press are filming and trying to record it if he comes over to us. We're all then rushed onto the back of the plane, and that is a completely separate cabin. You can't see anything else unless the door is opened when the president comes back sometimes. But even then, there's only a very limited view you have of another room there. So the moments that you can get access to and see the president on the plane are entirely decided by the president himself and the staff around him.
And finally, Tom, earlier we heard from Donald Trump telling reporters on board the plane that he's #1 on Iran's hit list, but, quote, if he goes, you go, to reporters. Are you concerned now about getting back on that plane?
No, I mean, you've got to remember the president's probably the most secured individual on this planet. And so I think, although, I mean, the other thing I was at this year was the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where, a gunman got into the hotel and tried to get towards the room where President Trump was, and all of that commotion that you probably remember as well, because you're around the US president, there is a huge amount of security. I think what's making this more of a story, of course, is the element of deception here. And certainly, you heard that colleagues of some of those reporters were really worried that they, in effect, were being used as a decoy. I think part of the problem is it's very hard to know just how credible the threat was. But obviously, the intelligence agencies took it seriously enough to move him to another plane. So I think that will raise concerns. It might also raise questions about whether or not this has actually been done previously, not just with President Trump, but with other presidents. It is possible. One of the officials quoted in the Washington Post piece says that this kind of maneuver or operation has been used before where presidents have moved, but wouldn't elaborate on when or where or how that had taken place.
Tom, thank you. So there we are. That's what we know about Donald Trump's secretive plane swap to avoid a potential threat from Iran.